because they are so politically partisan, which, you know, is it's just kind of crazy.
And on that note, I'm going to interrupt Miss Dana Lash for a moment. You've been waiting for it. Now we're going to finally deliver on our promise. Shantel Krebs is in the house.
Yes, Alexa, thanks for having me. It's always a delight to come West River. These are my folks, of course. I understand the ranchers, and back east, of course, I'm a farm girl who's born and raised on a family farm. So it's delightful to come out and visit with our rancher folks and just tell you my story of why I'm running.
Yeah, well, with the primaries coming up tomorrow, that's important that everybody understands what's going on with the candidates and can get, you know, an earful of what everyone has to say. So how would you like to start? Do you want to go over a little bit of your background?
Sure, it'd be delightful. Thank you, Alexa. I'm a fourth-generation farm girl from Arlington, South Dakota, so Kingsbury County, where my mom and dad were a small family farm operation. And Dad also has a trucking company where he hauls cattle and grain. And, of course, he's 77 years old,
Wow.
Still hauling cattle. And Mom's 74. She does the books at the house for us. You know, truly the epitome of South Dakota hard-working family. And that's really the beauty of my background. It's just the core family values, the conservative family values that I grew up in. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college, and I actually put myself through college waitressing.
Wow.
So waitress at the local cafe, went to Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota.
Was that back when tuition was much lower?
Yes,
than
it
is
was.
today?
You know, in fact, the statistic is I believe college is about 500% more today than it was for me almost 20-some years ago. And that's truly one of those things that we should talk about and can discuss later here. But the cost of college education, and is college education right for everyone? And I think that's the question a lot of folks can have and should have. But anyway, Dakota State University graduate, then went on and spent a little time in healthcare, and then opened up my own two businesses in downtown Sioux Falls. And
Retail businesses.
Yes. You know, and I really understand one of the campaign focal points has always been making a stop in Main Street. And because I truly understand what it's like to be a small Main Street owner. It's hard. It is tough out there. And I understand the challenges, the frustration, and what we hear across the state is typically that they're frustrated with the federal government. They're frustrated that the federal government is in their lives, get out of their lives, get out of their businesses so that they can do their jobs. And that's exactly what I felt like when I was in the business and when I had my little retail stores, is that you couldn't get open lines of credit or bank loans because of overregulation in the banking industry. It's the same thing today. Overregulation, you can't get bank loans, you know, too much paperwork to fill out, or the government forcing you to pay this tax or this tax for this when you shouldn't have to do all these extra taxes, whether it be into the futures fund or the unemployment fund. I mean, those are things that should be done, but only if you're abusing the system or using the system. When I was a retailer, I didn't have anybody drawing unemployment, but yet you still had to pay in. You know, those are the costs of doing business, and it's tough. It's the same thing with farmers and ranchers. They're tired of the federal government, like the EPA, telling them that they have to, a few years back, are going to have to control their dust. Or just even 6 months ago. Yeah, remember? And how about 6 months ago that the EPA was going to tell us that you had to report how much emission was coming off of your hazardous waste? I mean, seriously. I mean, that's the ridiculous part about federal government.
Have you heard about the ELD, the electronic logging
don't
device
get me
for
started
truckers?
with my father, of course, who is a truck driver who
Okay.
hauls cattle. That is one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress, is because, again, the government is in the way and in the lives of our business. And so when you asked me a little bit about my background, then I ran for Secretary of State because it was a failing mess of an office. And when you talk about state government being a mess in Pierre, this is one example of a failing bureaucratic office where I had to walk into 4 years ago and turn it around. It was a crisis 4 years ago. Business filings were over 6 weeks behind, concealed carry permits over 30 days behind, the bank liens weren't being filed for over 80 days. I walked into a mess, and we've turned that office around. And my campaign slogan was at the time, we're going to operate it at the speed of business. And that's exactly what we do. We don't operate the speed of government. We operate the speed of business.
And the speed of American business.
And that's what you have to do, because the businesses are in real time. They're not 6 weeks later for paperwork. And that's what was happening. Our government, our state government, was literally bottlenecking business. And that is absolutely wrong and unacceptable in my eyes. I work for you. My staff works for you, the taxpayer. And we darn well better do what you expect us to do. And that's been my mission and goal, is we've restored the integrity and the trust in that office. office, but not only that, we operate in real time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the favorite things that I like to talk about is how we restored our budget, and we have implemented zero-based budgeting in our office. What does that mean? Now, all of you at our homes do that. All of you do that on your ranches. We take and say every year at the beginning of the year, we zero it out, we tell us and say, what do we need for that year? And we justify it. We don't have a bloated budget like most government agencies do, and they take it from year to year and then grow on it.
Mm-hmm.
We say, what are you going to need for that year? You might need a little bit less in a certain area and a little bit more in a certain area because it's that year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what state government and the federal government should be doing, is justifying each line item. And that means that Congress needs to take up a budget every year. There's 12 budgets that should be taken up every year, and they're not doing it. That is pushing off, and exactly my frustration for the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm running because I feel like the first time in my life, Alexa, that the federal government is becoming more accountable and more responsive to you, the taxpayer. And that's because President Trump is running it like a business. And I'm going to go there to help President Trump deliver results. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, I am running for Congress.
Alrighty. Well, another one of the things about government I've been hearing a lot about, and a lot of people mention, is transparency and making our state and local government accountable. Can you explain to us your stance on that?
Boy, you have really hit one on the head for me, and that is something that I've done in my office. So I'll share with you the 3 things I want to work on. But the number one is what you just asked. How are you going to reform government? And that's what I want to work on: creating efficiencies, cutting spending, and finding ways that you can become more transparent. And that is reforming government. That's what we did in the Secretary of State's office. That's why I'm your tested government reformer. I've done that in the Secretary of State's office. We have opened up everything on my website. You can see in real time where we're at with every business filing in real time and every piece of information. I instituted transparency and process dates. So you can go on my business site and look at everything that you want to know. That's because I work for you and you want to know what's happening in that business division. If your filings are getting done on time, I have the process through dates right there on our website. I have opened up all of the information on federal information, how you file a complaint process, campaign financing. That's all now accessible online that hadn't been in the previous administration. So
Great.
Transparency is what transforms a government, because then you, Alexa, can hold me accountable and say, you know what, where's this information? That's what we've done in this office, so that I now know, you know where everything's at, and you can hold me accountable and say, Shantel, I want to know some information. I'll say, here's the website, and go to that information. So accountability, transparency, efficiencies are the 3 things that we focused on in this office. And that's why we've been able to cut our budget. We've been able to find efficiencies like we do in our businesses, and then cut our budget. And then now we can say, guess what? We don't need these things for next year. That is an absolute ridiculous waste. We've cut federal programs in my office, and that's what they need to do in Washington, D.C. I want every department to come before me and justify line by line their expense. I'm tired of the federal government just going willy-nilly and growing on their budget from the year before. And I say that and kind of laughing, but that's exactly what I think we're all frustrated with. So you get me fired up when you ask about transparency and accountability. That's exactly what I've lived on and done in the Secretary of State's office these last 4 years, and that is one of the first things I'm going to work on for you in Congress.
Well, one of the things that I'm seeing is that everybody, that's great. We're finally talking about transparency and a lot of these corruption issues and everything else. And I think people, especially at the local level, I've been talking to some people, different candidates, and for, not only commissioner, but we had a couple other folks in here too, Bill Clark, District 29, Senate, and everything. And they seem like really accessible people, that if you have a problem, they're willing to go out there, drive the truck, go out to the farm, and talk to folks. You're moving up to this seat. It's, that's a little higher up than our little District 29 is, but how do you talk to the people of South Dakota? Is it a one-on-one thing? Is it through, technological challenge?
Well, a couple things. The second thing I want to be on and take care of in Washington, D.C. is be on the Agriculture Committee.
Yeah.
And so that's going to tie into what I'm going to talk about as far as accessibility. The agricultural industry, of course, is the #1 industry in South Dakota, and you have to have someone that has a background in it. So I was born and raised on a small family farm in Kingsbury County in Arlington, South Dakota, and that's why I'm the best person for this job.
I vaguely remember a story about you shooting a rattlesnake with a Judge revolver.
That is, thank you. You remember that. I tell you what, use those 410 shot shells, the best ever. Love my Judge revolver. My husband got it for my birthday when we moved West River to our ranch in Fort Pierre in Stanley County. And so he's like, this is a good rattlesnake gun, I hear. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'll use it. Well, I'll be darned if Mr. Rattlesnake didn't show up on my back porch. And there he was, and went back in and got my the Judge revolver, loaded the 410s in there, and that was the best way to dispatch that snake. But anyway, that's you talk about accountability and how are we going to make government more accountability and accessible. It's really making sure if I'm going to Congress and I'm elected, I'm going to come back every weekend and detox. I mean, I say that with kind of a laugh, but that's truly what it has to be. I want to have that blue sky and that fresh air and come back to our little ranch in Stanley County. I need to see people, because then you're going to hold me accountable. Just like I did in the Secretary of State's office. I was out talking to you at Kiwanis Club, Rotary Clubs, meetings, even sale barns with my dad. Those are all things that we make sure to hear the issues and concerns. And people laugh when I walk by in the office and the phone ring, and I'm picking it up. And I'll say, Secretary of State's office, and they're like, hello. I go, this is Shantel. How can I help you? They're like, this is Shantel. I'm like, yes, I'm answering the phone because it's ringing. Answer the phone at the third ring, right? That's accessibility. And so, yes, there's technology. Yes, I'll come back every weekend and detox, but you have to hold me accountable, and so that means staying in contact. When you get frustrated as a citizen or a taxpayer, you got to let me know. And, we get frustrated and then say, what the heck, they're not going to listen to me. Yes, we do. Everything in that Secretary of State's office, I was checking in with businesses and checking in with the attorneys and the bankers and saying, what can we do to change it to make it better? And I responded and listened to them, and that's exactly what I'll do out in Washington, D.C. is listen and say, come on, what do you need? What are the concerns that you're having? And that's what we've heard on the campaign trail, is they're just frustrated with the federal government in the way. My goal is to deregulate. That's why I want to be on that egg committee. I need to deregulate government to get them out of our way of our ranchers. That's exactly our problem with the federal government right now. And, nobody likes to have government in our lives. It's like raising our children. Let parents be parents. Why are we having the federal government tell us how to raise our children in deciding what kind of education, and that they're shoving Common Core down our throat? I despise Common Core. I tried to remove Common Core in the legislature, and of course the Dugard administration and my opponent Dusty Johnson supported it and wanted to advance Common Core. And I do not support Common Core, and that's a perfect example of how the federal government is trying to raise our kids. Let our parents be parents.
Yeah, I actually taught journalism and English for less than a year up in Northeast Montana, and it was a shock to me because I worked in newspaper and radio and everything, to be a teacher and see what was happening in the school. And that is at least in certain areas, it wasn't up to what I remember it being when I was a kid. And I did my best, but I'm no actual teacher, so it's it's good to be talking about those school issues. And speaking of school issues, you've got the School Sentinel program.
Yes,
that you're pretty invested in.
I am. When I was in the legislature, I supported the School Sentinel program, and it's found success in South Dakota, and that's a perfect example. Of course, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, and was endorsed by the NRA in the Secretary of State's races, as you well know.
Yeah.
I own guns and defend, and that I am going to Washington, D.C. to defend our Second Amendment right. It's a constitutional right. It's an individual right. And we got to fight against the liberal gun grabbers that are across this nation. And it's frustrating, when people ask me and say, well, do you want gun control? Absolutely not. What we need is meaningful mental health reform. Let's get the root of the problem. It's the family. What's the problem? What is causing this distress and emotional turmoil within that individual? And so that's the root cause, is our families, the lack of moral decay and decline of our Christian values. So me as a Christian conservative, that's what I want to fight against. And it's tough. I will tell you, it's going to be a battle. But I truly believe that success, and I am, when you vote for Shantel Krebs, you're a vote for President Trump. I am a vote with President Trump, and I stand with him, whether it be on securing our borders, building the wall, implementing extreme vetting, ending chain migration. There is no immigration reform until we do all of that first. That is my immigration policy. Let's build that wall, because 90% of our drugs coming into South Dakota, or in this nation even, is coming through our southern border. Build the wall to control the drugs.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned the success of the School Sentinel program. I saw in one article a couple weeks ago, there was, sadly another school shooting, and you said that the inquiry rate had ramped up a little bit on that. Did you have numerous other inquiries? Are you still getting more?
We have. I think East River probably a little bit more, but West River, people know out here and across South Dakota in general that we're we're a Second Amendment defender, that we know it's a constitutional right, that we know it's an individual right that we've been given and granted into our Constitution. And so that's what we have to remember, is our constitutional rights, and that being the Second Amendment is our right to carry, our right to bear and carry arms. So when we talk about those issues, that's what I'm passionate about. The other thing I wanted to work on, I shared with you, reforming government, finding efficiencies, accountability, transparency. Number 2, I wanted to be on that ag committee because I'm the only one in this race that's grown up on a small family farm. Number 3, the last thing is really talking about our South Dakota family values. Alexa, I think we're pretty rugged, independent people out here. And again, the last thing that they want us to do and go to Washington, D.C. is to tell us how to raise our kids and our families. And so when you talk about our Christian schools or schools across the state, is just to say why there's not a one-size-fits-all. And the federal government tries to do that, and South Dakota is a perfect example. It doesn't. It doesn't work, and that's why we let that local control decide what's best for their kids in that community, or our state to say what's the state board of education desire. We talk about welfare recipients and things like that. That's all about a farm bill, and we can get in that farm bill. But when you have a $1 trillion farm bill, Alexa, and 80% of it's welfare assistance, there is room for reform, and I'm going after it. If you're going to be an able-bodied person, you darn well better be able to work. And so that work requirement, if you're going to receive assistance, is something that I'm going to demand. Now, I was also a co-sponsor in the state legislature demanding welfare recipients to be drug screened. And of course, Governor Dugard and his administration and Dusty's crew, they came up and killed that bill. And I don't understand why we as a state can't decide and let us drug screen, if we want to, those that are receiving assistance. That is something that I would support, that each state can implement their own policies and guidelines of how you want to provide welfare assistance, because each state is so much better. Give that block grant, let them manage it. If they want drug screening, that's what I tried to get passed in the state legislature as a co-sponsor, got killed in committee.
Has any state passed that, a drug screening?
A couple have, yes, and so it is successful. And the challenge is the federal government says, well, you can't be tying strings to it. Well, that's exactly what I want to do, is untie those strings. I don't want to have strings attached to the federal government. That's exactly what is wrong. When you have money coming and flowing through the state with federal grants, there's no accountability. I want every federal grant that's coming into the state, or any state, to have letters of intent and performance measures in place. I imposed my own audit on my office. Why aren't we having outside audits on all these federal grants and saying, okay, what's this money for? Where's it going? And then there better be performance measures and letters of intent attached to it, saying this is what it's for, this is what you've gotten out of it, this is what it's being used for, and then are there outcomes? Did you get a benefit out of this program, and has there been improvement in an area? And is your investment as a taxpayer worth it? A great example is the Gear Up program. It didn't have any accountability measures. I want performance measures, and those reviews should be done to me every 6 months, for sure every year. And of course, there was no oversight, and that's what's the lack of it. So that's, again, going back to your theme, Alexa, when you asked me, oversight, accountability, transparency. I'm tough on that. That's what I've been proven to do and shown the success in the Secretary of State's office. When I walked into a failing bureaucratic office with the least accountable measures in place, we've turned around and cut our budget for this last year in 2018 by 21%.
I do like how you say bureaucracy like it's a bad word.
It is a bad word. It makes my skin just crawl.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what it is. It's a bureaucracy. And you got to have people that when you send somebody to Washington, you have to send somebody that hasn't been a lifetime bureaucrat, all their lives worked in state government. And, having myself been a small business owner, my mom and dad still at 77 years old running their tiny little farming operation, a small trucking company. That's what real people are like. I mean, that's what you need to send to Washington, D.C., somebody like myself that understands it. It's tough out there. And I've been there, not getting a bank loan and wondering how I'm going to make payroll and rent in those months. And it's been tough. You have to draw on your own funds to be able to keep your business alive. There's several months when it's slow.
What were those retail businesses that you had?
Yeah, a little shoe store and a little clothing store.
Oh,
it was fun.
cute.
It was right when Sioux Falls downtown was really kind of opening up and just growing and flourishing. So we were on the pioneering start of it, really. And I'm very proud of that fact, but it was hard. There's challenges, but it doesn't matter if you're in Sioux Falls or if you're in Main Street Huron, or if you're in Main Street Belfourche,
Mm-hmm.
all the flower shop owners, the coffee shop owners, the cafe owners, the hardware store owners, they're all telling me the same thing. They can't get bank loans and they have to survive on a bank loan, but banking has been overregulated, so that's a challenge. And that's a perfect example of federal government in the way of their business.
What about the co-ops, the banking co-ops, not being taxed the same way as small town banks?
Sure, so you have, go ahead.
Yeah, if you can expand on that.
Sure, first of all, I feel like the first thing that we need to take a step in is with banking in general is deregulation. Dodd-Frank has got to be deregulated, and there has been no oversight as far as that Consumer Financial Protection Board. We need congressional oversight first before they can start imposing any new rules or any new burdensome regulations on any banks. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge is that banking industry has been overregulated, but really there's a difference between big banks and small banks. And in South Dakota, we have a majority of independent community banks here. And when you walk into a bank, and of course my office deals with a lot of the banks, when you have 2 compliance officers for every 1 ag lender, that's a problem. You should have 2 or 3 ag lenders versus 1 compliance officer. Because look at your farmers and ranchers. How many young ranchers here, or any rancher, is having to try to get a bank loan, and they have a hard time. This is tough times. Commodity prices are tough. They need to be able to sustain just a little bit to get them through until things get a little bit better and that there's diversification. But the banks are saying, I can't do it. Their hands are tied because of a regulation. So first and foremost, it's deregulation. Now let me tell you what my idea is on that, Alexa. I feel that any new rule that comes out of any agency in Washington, D.C., it should have to go through a congressional oversight committee, like we do in South Dakota legislature. If there is a new rule that's to be imposed in South Dakota, you have to go through the rules hearing, and then you have to come and tell us what you're doing, and you justify, and then you have the legislators vote on it. Congress should be the same way. I don't feel any new rule coming out of, especially the EPA, which is a 3-letter word we all get frustrated with, that you should have to go through, that EPA should have to go before our congressmen and women and tell us and justify what that new rule is, because half the time it's ridiculous and it's something that they haven't thought through, and they need to have a hearing and a say from your constituents to be able to come forth and say this is ridiculous. They have their write-in periods or their comment periods that you can do that. But come on, let's have a hearing. Make Congress work year-round and have these hearings. That's what I'm going to do. And again, President Trump is trying to do that, roll back those regulations, and I support President Trump in every step of the way. I am in lockstep, and that is why I'm running, because I support President Trump and I want to help him. I will be a vote for him.
Absolutely. Well, we've got, like I said, the primary tomorrow. I've been reminding everybody at the top of the hour, go vote, go vote. But I still got more questions for you, but what's something else you really want to get out to the folks out there to know about you or your policies or what you can do?
Sure. Well, go check out our website for any specific issue. We have our topics that would be religious freedoms, our pro-life stance, which I'm been supported by the largest pro-life group. So go check out my website. But I'll just sum it up in a couple areas. Number 1, life's experiments. I am the only one in this race that's been born and raised on a small family farm. Number 2, I'm the only one in this race that has owned 2 little small retail businesses and signed both sides of the paycheck and understand the challenges. The only one in this race that has turned around a failing bureaucrat office in state government. I am a tested government reformer with real life experiences, ready to go to Washington, D.C. to do the same thing out there, because I'm just as frustrated as you are, Alexa, and I'm just as frustrated as South Dakota voters are telling me they are. It's time to get government out of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got one quick question about West South Dakota. A lot of folks out here are a little concerned that traditionally, Eastern South Dakota has gotten taken care of first, or at least paid a little bit more attention to. Is there any way you can bridge that gap between East and West?
Well, I truly think it's about the issues. And so for me, as your next congresswoman, it's about making sure there's a livestock indemnification program for our ranchers out here if they get stuck with an Atlas blizzard again, or even this last April when there's this last snowstorm and we had a possible calf loss rate of about 20%. It's making sure that the government's there to help them in times when they need it. It's making sure that Ellsworth Air Force is taken care of and our military funding is provided for our Air Force base, because they need to have long-term planning, but that also means taking up a budget. It's making sure that our veterans are taken care of. That means keeping hope in the Veterans Hospital in Hot Springs and in Fort Meade to take care of those that have served our country, which is a top priority. We have one of the largest per capita servicemen and women, our veterans here in the state of South Dakota, with over 75,000 veterans. That's a lot. So it's about the issues. And of course, West River, it's those types of issues. It's Ellsworth, it's our veterans care, it's our ranchers making sure that they're taken care of when they need to be, when natural disaster strikes. It's taking care of our small businesses on Main Street, Belfouche, or Spearfish, or Sturgis. East River, it may be something different. It may be something where our farmers need the commodity prices and that safety, that crop safety net. So I truly, as always said, it's about the issue and where that issue is in South Dakota and the time and the need that we need to take care and have a strong voice understanding that issue for both sides of the state, or Northeast South Dakota where there's water. Tons of water up in northeastern South Dakota where bridges and roads are underwater, and how you handle that.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to get a little bit, I have another question here if you wouldn't mind answering, because I saw it pop up over the weekend, and it's about that super PAC that's been running some ads against Dusty and everything, but that's part of Axiom Strategies. And you use Axiom Strategies for campaign firm, right?
Sure, and let me ask you this. Have you seen the Super PAC ads that have been attacking Shantel Krebs? There's ridiculous claims.
Personally, I don't own TV. I'm a radio girl.
Good for you,
so.
Well, I tell you, it's been frustrating. Thank you for letting me bring that up, because I will tell you, it's out-of-state money that's influencing and buying South Dakota's elections, and that's the problem I have, and I have a lot of challenges with that too. But bottom line is, let South Dakotans decide this election, and not outside interest groups and out-of-state money from Chicago and New York coming in with false and misleading information that have been attacking Shantel Krebs on baseless attacks with misinformation. We've been dealing with that. You know, that's the challenge. Is I think South Dakota voters are smarter than that.
Well, is that
Do the
Super
research.
PAC running ads for, pro you? Are they in state or out of state? There's a Super PAC.
I don't know. Again, these are super PACs that again are running ads against me, and the ads I think that again running against Dusty. It's the same thing. They're running against Jackley, against no out-of-state super PACs are coming in and trying to influence this election. Alexa, the problem is we have out-of-state money trying to influence. South Dakota voters have got to do their research, because information may not be correct. And when you have out-of-state coming in here with an agenda, that's the problem here. And so make sure you're doing your research. Go to our websites, ask the questions, ask your neighbors, ask those that have maybe been involved or know an individual personally. That's the best way to be an informed voter tomorrow, Alexa.
Absolutely. I do agree, and out-of-state money coming in and doing that, but you don't know if there is a Super PAC running ads on your behalf.
No, you can't know. We don't know that. Of course, I have no idea if there's an out-of-state PAC, of course, that's supporting Dusty and working in conjunction with Dusty as well, because those out-of-state super PACs have been running negative ads on me. So is that something that Dusty has been aligned with? We got to ask that question. But again, that's why I'm telling you as the voter, Alexa, to make sure you go do that research, because there's been a negative attacks on every side of every campaign, whether it be for governor or Congress. So what I want to tell you is to make sure you do your research, because you can't believe a lot of the ads, especially when they're from out of state. If something said, I'm going to put my name on it, and you've seen that, my name is on that, whatever it's going to say, paid for by Shantel Krebs. That's what I've said, and I have no problem. In South Dakota, I put my name on things, and I'll state the case, and that's where you know I stand. Same as Secretary of State. I put my name on the stances. I put my name on my budget cuts. I put my name on the justifications of where we've had to clean up an office for the last 4 years, and I'm proud to do that, because South Dakotans expect that, and that's the integrity of this office. And for you as South Dakotans, you have the integrity to understand or do your research.
Gotcha. Which is why we love doing this program and doing uninterrupted interviews and letting people get to know folks. So that's a huge thing. Is there anything else that I know you got a busy day today. Is there anything else you want to let folks know before voting tomorrow? And don't forget, vote tomorrow. It's a primary.
Don't forget to take first your ID. So when you go vote, take your ID. And if you can't find your polling location, go to my website, the Secretary of State's website, to find your polling location. That's just a sidebar, so you know you can find your polling location ahead of time. But I'm going to close with this, Alexa. Again, I'm your tested government reformer. I'm the only one in this race that has really reformed government like President Trump is trying to do. I'm not going to be the establishment status quo going out there and just go along to get along with the herd. That is not me. Yeah. I've proven it that I step out and above and beyond, and I fight the establishment and peer every day. And I love coming to my office and getting questioned and challenged, because that's the right thing to do. There's one thing that I've done in my campaign is just do the right thing, and that's standing up and saying I'm tired of the federal government and I'm ready to go take them on.
Alrighty, sounds good, everybody. That is Secretary of State Shantel Krebs running for the South Dakota House seat. Thank you very much for coming in and taking the time today.
It's been a delight. Thanks for having me.
Super. Okay, well, that wraps it up for our live interviews today. We're going to get you back to Dana Lash right now, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
America at the same time. They all matter.
Alrighty.
To the
We are
lives of ordinary
square.
Americans. So to the
I'll let you
extent
shut off the
that
camera
this
too.
is just
Yeah.
part of the new
What a
normal,
great